It's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to another edition of Q&A with the Coach. We have a question today from Funny YouTube Channel. That's a screen name. Our friend says, "Hey Coach, I love to listen to your videos at work. I think you have great insight in both life and training and how both of these are interconnected. I recently listened to one of your videos where you told someone to look into themselves and ask them to look themselves in the mirror and find that dark motivation to get out and train. I did the same for myself, and I don't really like what I saw. I think ever since I was like 13, I've only tried to achieve great things purely out of spite. A bit of backstory. I have severe ADHD that went undetected, unmedicated, and autism that went undiagnosed until I was 18. Because of this, I did very badly in school and was quite the outcast. I very clearly remember one day in middle school, we got this test to see what science class we could get into, and I remember I studied not to get a bit of a head start, but to show my teachers and peers I was better than what they thought of me. After looking at myself, I see what drives me as some sort of anger that makes me want to show all the people that treated me badly that I'm better than them, and hit them with a rear naked choke along with that. I don't know if this is particularly healthy, but without it, I don't think I would have tried in school or started training at all. I was wondering what your thoughts are about this, and if there's any healthy ways you can think I can channel this anger. Thanks if you read this. Keep up the good work." All right, my friend. First of all, I would recommend watch this video by our friend Tillander. He's a weightlifting coach, and it's awesome. It's about that part of athletics, that part of competition that nobody talks about. It is raw, it is real, and he tells you all about how these very famous athletes, for example, Michael Jordan, were able to channel these feelings, these feelings we consider to be very negative in a very positive way. And yeah, man, check that out. It's an amazing video. And if you're not subscribed to Zach, go follow his channel. He's great, man. Love that dude. Your question reminded me of this. What is the difference between a comic book superhero and a comic book villain? I love comic books. Let's talk about that for a little bit. Maybe not what you were expecting. What's the difference between the villain and the hero? Obviously, the villain does bad things, makes bad choices, and the hero makes heroic decisions and has heroic actions. But if we don't look inside of their character, they're very, very similar. Sometimes they have the exact same power set. We have the Flash and we have the Reverse Flash, literally the same power set. Two speedsters that can move very, very fast. One is good, one is evil. What happened there? If you look at Spider-Man's rogue gallery, he has this list of totemic supervillains with animal-based superpowers, much like he himself has animal-based powers based on the spider. And many of his villains in his rogues gallery, they have similar stories to Spider-Man. They were poor kids who got beat up and teased and picked on, and they were weak. And, they were smart, though. And when they got their powers, they were like, I'll show them all. And they became wicked. Contrast that with Peter Parker, Spider-Man. He has a rough life. He's an orphan. He's poor. He gets picked on and beaten up by the bullies. And he gets his powers. And initially, he used them for selfish reasons to try to make some money. But then he remembers his Uncle Ben's teachings and decides to live his life in a more self-sacrificial, heroic way. And so Spider-Man, who has, you could say, the same kind of motivations as the bad guys, because he had this positive father figure, his uncle, but a father figure, a paternal figure in his life to guide him and direct him on a righteous path, was able to channel that into a different direction. And unfortunately, that is a figure, that righteous paternal figure is increasingly absent from kids these days, unfortunately. I mean, we like to think, oh, the problems are ADHD or undiagnosed autism, and nah, man. The real problem isn't the hand that we are dealt. If we get a crappy hand, that's not the real problem. It's how you deal with it. So, going back to the comic book analogy, Peter Parker was dealt a pretty raw deal at the beginning of his life. He had all kinds of reasons to be angry and upset. And this is one of the reasons why I love Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's and John Romita Jr.'s characters, the way they wrote them. Because they wrote these incredible heroic archetypes, which I found personally inspiring. Like, I couldn't read their stories, even the hokey, silly ones, without being inspired to be better. Because there's something deeper at play there. Everybody, at some point in their lives, in one way or another, is dealt a bad hand, is given a raw deal. We have no choice about that, about what hand we're dealt. The only choice we will ever be given is how we choose to feel about that, how we accept that, how we play our hand, if you will. I'm using poker analogies, weirdly. I'm not a poker player. It's funny how many gambling analogies have worked their way into the English language. But I understand what you're saying, man. I can relate to your story very, very much, being the outcast, being picked on, wanting to just make everybody understand by force if necessary. You're not better than me. Ugh, I'll show you. I get it. I understand it. That is the entire reason that I started martial arts in the first place, because bullies beat me up. And I saw Bruce Lee on a screen kicking butt, and I was like, I want that. I want that so I can beat up these bullies and show them who's boss. I want that so I can avenge myself. And there was anger inside. A lot of it. I've spoken about this before, but I'll recap here. It's very important to bridle your passions. We don't want to get rid of our emotions, because this anger, as you see in Zach's video, can lead to some of the most constructive things that athletes have ever done. Like what you're describing, that's essentially Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant's motivation to be great in the sport of basketball. That's why they did what they did. That was their why. Spite, but spite bridled and harnessed the right way. So we have this wild animal inside of us, like a wild horse that just wants to be free and go out there and buck and kick and right? And a horse can be a very useful animal to a human being, man. You can ride that thing. It can work for you. It can do things for you. If the relationship that you have with that horse is the right one, if you can tame that animal. Bridle your passions. What does that mean? Does that mean kill them, kill the horse? No. It means you put the bit in the horse's mouth and you have the reins on it. And if you have the right relationship with that animal, you ask it to do things for you and it does them. And then you work together almost symbiotically and you can do more than you could separately. So that's what you need to do, man. Bridle the passions. Harness that anger, harness that frustration, and funnel it into something good. Did you ever read the Superior Spider-Man story arc? If you didn't, I'll give you a few mild spoilers. I love Spider-Man, but after I moved to China, it was hard to follow comic books. Then I found out about online comics, and about that time, they changed up the Spider-Man story a little bit, and Dr. Octopus, one of Spider-Man's classic villains, he was dying of cancer, and he wanted his revenge on Spider-Man. Doc Ock had a very similar background to Spider-Man. He was a nerd, just like Peter Parker was. He was smart, he was studious, he got picked on, he got bullied. And he went in a different direction than Peter Parker. He didn't harness that negativity the same way. And he became a villain. And he wants his revenge. And so he decides, I'm going to switch minds with Peter Parker. And so Peter Parker, his mind will go into my dying body. He's going to die. I'll have my revenge. And then I will take Spider-Man's body. And then I will have power beyond belief. And so he does this. He switches mind, switches consciousness with Peter Parker. Peter Parker goes into Doc Ock's frail body. He dies. Spider-Man, how many times has Spider-Man died? Quite a few, actually, and he's always seemed to come back to life somehow. Anyway, Dr. Octopus is now in possession of the body of Spider-Man. He's like, Mohan, I'm going to go out and do wicked things even more than ever, but slowly he starts having a change of heart when he starts seeing the sort of life that he's found himself in. At first he's like, I'm going to go be a superior villain. And then after a while he realizes, you know what? I am going to get my revenge on Spider-Man by being the superior Spider-Man, by being a better Spider-Man than he ever was, because he held himself back in all these different ways. Look, Peter Parker, he never got a PhD, never got his doctorate's degree. The dude was a genius, and he outsmarted me all of these times, and he never got his doctorate's degree. I'm going to get my revenge on Peter Parker by getting a doctorate's degree in his name. And so it's quite fascinating that the evil Dr. Octopus now harnesses this spite of his enemy to essentially lift his enemy up in all these interesting ways. He gets a doctorate's degree for Peter Parker. He fights crime better than Peter Parker ever did. He has superior technology to what Peter Parker had. He does all these things that Peter Parker was never able to do. He fixes some of Peter Parker's failed relationships that he wasn't able to do. It's quite fascinating. And then ultimately, Doc Ock kind of becomes a good guy. It's weird. It's interesting. And then eventually Peter Parker comes back somehow. But it's a fascinating story. So why do I bring this up? Because it's an example of harnessing that negativity. Again, his initial quest was to get revenge, to show his enemy, you suck and I hate you and I'm going to make you pay. But then ultimately, by funneling this negativity into a positive direction, he was able to do amazing things. Superior things, as the title indicates. So, what am I telling you? Be like a Marvel supervillain? Be like Dr. Octopus? Kinda. Channel yourself into positive directions. Bridle your passions. That wild animal inside of you, don't kill it, use it. Because that's part of you. I just rewatched one of my favorite Star Trek, the original series episodes, The Enemy Within. If you haven't seen that one, we're going down the nerd hole today. Maybe not what you expected, but we're going to do it. The Enemy Within. Captain Kirk is on the Starship Enterprise, and they have a transporter, a teleporting machine. And while teleporting Captain Kirk back from the surface of an alien planet back to the ship, there's a transporter malfunction. And it creates two Captain Kirks. Well, two halves of the same person. It's like the yin and the yang, and they're separate. You have the good Captain Kirk and the bad Captain Kirk, sort of. Not really. You have the animal side of Captain Kirk. You have the side that experiences the anger and the frustration, but it's also the part that drives him to excellence. And the good Captain Kirk, he's really the harmless Captain Kirk. He learns pretty quickly he's not able to make executive decisions without the other guy. He's not able to make the tough calls. He's not able to channel that negativity in a constructive way. And so at the end they realize they need each other, and they have to find a way to fix the transporter malfunction and put the two halves of Captain Kirk back together so he can be a complete person. And this is a fascinating episode for a lot of reasons, but one of which is it is the answer to your question. You need both halves of you. You need them. What's a peaceful person? Who was it? Jordan Peterson talked about this. What's a peaceful person? Is it a harmless person? No. It is a person who is capable of war and then keeps the peace. If you are not capable of war, you are not peaceful, you are harmless, he said. And that is an interesting thing. That's essentially what we learn from The Enemy Within. The peaceful Captain Kirk. Was he peaceful? Well, he was harmless, and because of his harmlessness, he almost got his men killed by being unable to make the executive decisions. But of course, the other side, unchecked, unbridled. What did that Captain Kirk do? Oh man, he went out, first thing he did, gets drunk and starts harassing women and just being all rapey and terrible and getting in fights and nobody likes evil Captain Kirk. I love evil Captain Kirk, man, he was great. But yeah, the two halves of them together made one whole. Sounds pretty obvious. That's you, man. That's you. Be a complete Captain Kirk. Be a complete, what was your screen name again? A complete funny YouTube channel. If you actually do have a funny YouTube channel, please send me a link. I'd love to check it out. I love to laugh. Thanks for watching and listening to my nerd rant. Now get out there and train.